I've been watching the Republican National Convention and the Democratic National Convention with a lot of interest. And I didn't really comment on it because I believe there's YouTubers that have far more interesting political commentary than I do. But I couldn't help but make one observation. Very interesting one. The Democrat National Convention had a lot of actors and influencers and big personalities that you get to see on TV. And the Republican National Convention had the average Joe. A lot of normal, average people that spoke there. I guess that kind of speaks a lot about the situation that America is in. And what's really interesting, if you look at all these actors, almost all of them, universally, are left-leaning at this point. Feel free to name me a right-wing actor, like some media celebrity that's in Hollywood and actually supports Trump. Because I can't think of many. I'm not saying there aren't, but if they are, I bet you can count them on one hand. And what is the likelihood of that happening? What is the likelihood of hiring actors, people that are supposed to play a role and they're the best for the job, and just all of them, literally all of them, happen to have the same political stance? And I think this is why. I literally think that this is the reason. Because you see, in Canada, in the NHL, a person said that he would vote Republican if he could. And he got punched in the face. And he also had to apologize. And I know a lot of cases that happened in the United States. Similarly, people who are for Trump are getting violence done upon them, violence inflicted on them. And it's very interesting, because in my country, this would be an aggravated offense. Hurting someone for his political beliefs is a big no-no. I guess your country needs to go through communism in order to get why that is a good thing. So in case you're a communist watching this, let me explain to you why punching people for political opinions is bad. You see, violence is the gold standard when it comes to human affairs. It is something that transcends culture. It is something that transcends language. I would say it's even something that transcends species. Like if a dog is aggressive to you and tries to bite you, but you manage to overpower the dog, it will stop doing that. It will stop trying to bite you. It will run away. So yes, violence is very powerful. And people that say violence doesn't solve anything are absolutely liars. It solves everything. Like, you don't need to have a conversation. You don't need to have a debate. You don't need to have a discussion. You simply use force. And then you get what you want if you manage to overpower whomever it is that you're trying to overpower, right? But what's the problem with violence? Why is it that it's still unacceptable? Because people have come to the conclusion that a society cannot flourish. People cannot be happy if violence keeps happening. You cannot have a business if people constantly riot in the streets. It's just not possible. As such, the state is the only one that has a monopoly on violence in order to allow civilization to flourish. Many other alternatives have been tried, none are as successful as if having the state having a monopoly on violence and being the ultimate arbiter when it comes to human interactions. And this is why we have voting, because otherwise people would just duke it out on the streets. It would be might makes right. The people that are the most strong and the ones that can convince more people to join them and do violence would be the ones that get to set the rules. And we're trying to avoid that, right? Because yes, it works. Like, realistically speaking, it works. But it also causes unrest. This is why almost all dictators use this thing in order to get into power. Like, most dictators that get into power don't get it through the democratic means. They get it through violence. Now, I am on the opinion, I don't know about communists, but I am on the opinion that violence isn't right. You can't have a civilized society where you have violence. I'm more for freedom and liberty. I do advocate for it only in the means of self-defense or when it comes to protecting yours or someone else's human rights. Other than that, I don't want to see it. And I think people like this that punch people for political opinion should be imprisoned. They should be put in jail because they are a danger for the very essence and the very heart of democracy. You cannot tolerate these people. They are intolerant. There is nothing more to discuss. They need to be separated from the normal population until they reform and turn into model decent citizens, which at this point They clearly are not. And it's the same reason why we have free speech. It's to prevent violence from happening. Because what is the problem? People have grievances, like legitimate grievances. And they can only be addressed through dialogue, through having a conversation. If you shut people up, those grievances still exist. Just because you're not talking about it doesn't mean they went away. And as those grievances amplify and amplify and amplify, then if people cannot talk, they are going to eventually go out and riot. And this is why free speech is a thing. It's not a thing because we like to hear what our opponents have to say or we need to tolerate what our opponents have to say, but it's actually a valve that makes sure the boiler doesn't explode. I can't believe I have to explain these things. I mean, you know, they should be self-evident. It's something that every single person living in a liberal democracy should understand. Because otherwise, how can you say that liberal democracy is a good thing if you don't understand the mechanisms through which it works? But anyway, right, so this is what happens when people step out of line. If I was the Trump campaign, I would have made a really nice logo with a guy that's on the ground and he's being beaten up by two other people, and it would be like, vote Democrat. Because apparently, like, if you don't have the arguments to convince people to vote for you, then I suppose, you know, like this violent thing, like tolerating violence and encouraging it, might be the only way to go through. And let me show you a clip where this violence is being promoted.
Don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country, and maybe there will be.
People need to start taking to the streets. This is a dictator.
You know, there needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
Enemies of the state.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
Do something about your dad's immigration practices, you feckless.
When they go low, we kick.
How do you resist the temptation to run up and wring her neck?
The biggest terror threat in this country is white men, most of them radicalized right up to the right.
I thought he should have punched him in the face. I said, even if you lost, he insulted your wife.
Yes.
He came down the escalator and called Mexicans rapists and murderers. He said, well, what do you think I should have done? I said, I think you should have punched him in the face and then gotten out of the race. You would have been a hero.
I'd like to punch him in the face. I said if we were in high school, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him.
Punch some people in the face!
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
They're still going to have to go out and put a bullet in Donald Trump, and that's a fact.
Look as his character is stabbed to death.
Where is John Wilkes Booth when you need him?
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
A Missouri state senator is under investigation by the Secret Service after saying she hopes President Trump is assassinated.
I will go and take Trump out tonight.
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
And sadly, the domestic enemies to our voting system and our honoring our Constitution are right at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And that should be, everyone should take note of that on both levels, that this isn't, they're not going to let up, and they should not.
If you think we're rallying now, you ain't seen nothing.
You know, it's kind of interesting because in social media, Facebook, Twitter, you're not allowed to instigate or to glorify violence. And they take a much broader definition than the one the law has, where even if you talk about a specific violent event and you don't condemn it, or you agree with some things that have happened, then you're in violation of the TOS and you get banned. It seems like we live in a time where Alex Jones is the problem, right? Like, he gets banned from all of the social media. Meanwhile, the people that I have just showed you are being glorified, lifted on shoulders, praised for their activism, despite the fact that actual Americans are suffering due to the violence that is going on right now. Isn't that interesting? I think Tucker Carlson managed to summarize it best. The progressives right now, they're the type of people that would steal your wallet. And when you accuse them, they have you arrested, and then they make you sit in a 2-hour seminar where they explain to you why crime doesn't pay.